The rain tapped gently against the window, and she sat in her favorite chair, a warm cup of tea resting in her hands. The city outside moved quickly, cars honking, people rushing by, and lights flickering in the early evening gloom. She had always felt a little detached from it all, moving through life with tasks and obligations that left little room for herself. That evening, however, something different waited for her in the corner of the attic. It was a small, dusty box she had not noticed in years. Curious, she pulled it closer and carefully opened it, revealing a collection of old CDs, each labeled in faded ink. One of them caught her eye immediately: Timeless Classical Music for the Soul. The title alone felt like an invitation. She wiped the dust off the cover and slid it into the CD player, unsure of what to expect. The first notes filled the room softly, delicate piano keys dancing with a lightness that made her lean forward, almost as if listening could pull her closer to something intangible. The sound was gentle, yet it carried a weight she could not define. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, and in that moment, the noise of the city and the worries of her day faded into the background. Each note seemed to speak directly to her, telling stories she had not known she wanted to hear. Time passed differently when she listened. What should have been a few minutes felt like hours, as though each piece unfolded an entire world before her. The melodies seemed alive, carrying emotions she had buried long ago. There was joy, but also sorrow, hope, and a quiet kind of understanding that felt personal, as if the composer had known her struggles and had written the music just for her. She felt an unexpected connection to something much larger than herself, a thread linking her to moments and feelings she had never been able to articulate. The next day, she returned to the attic, drawn by a strange, unspoken need to explore more. Each CD revealed something new, something different. A violin solo soared high and bright, filling her chest with warmth. A gentle cello melody soothed her mind, untangling thoughts she did not even realize were knotted tightly inside. She began to take notes, writing down the pieces that touched her most, the ones she wanted to revisit. With each discovery, she felt her spirit awaken, slowly opening to the beauty she had overlooked in her daily life. As the days turned into weeks, listening to classical music became a part of her routine. She would come home from work, change into comfortable clothes, and retreat into her living room, where the music waited like an old friend. The pieces became companions in quiet moments, filling the silence with meaning. She noticed how her breathing slowed, how her mind seemed clearer, how even small tasks, like washing dishes or organizing books, felt lighter when accompanied by the soft strains of a piano or the gentle swell of an orchestra. She began to realize that music was not just something to hear. It was something to feel, something that could move her in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, she received a particularly stressful call at work. Her hands trembled as she hung up the phone, tension gripping her shoulders. Without thinking, she returned home, put on one of her favorite pieces, and sat quietly. Within moments, the music began to work its subtle magic. The tension in her body eased, and her thoughts became more manageable. She felt emotions she had struggled to name rise and fall naturally, carried along by the music. It was a revelation. She understood then that she had found more than entertainment. She had found a kind of therapy, a way to process life without judgment or effort. Simply by allowing herself to be present with the music, she began to explore not just the pieces themselves, but also the stories behind them. She learned about composers who had faced enormous challenges: loss, illness, isolation, and yet had created beauty that endured through centuries. Each story added depth to her listening experience. She imagined Beethoven working late into the night, hands aching but determination unbroken. She pictured Chopin composing quietly in candlelit rooms, capturing the fragility and passion of life in each note. Mozart's playful energy seemed to leap off the page, inviting her to smile even in moments of quiet reflection. She felt a kinship with these musicians, connected across time by shared human experiences expressed through sound in her apartment. Small rituals formed around music. She would light a candle, sit with a notebook, and let the pieces guide her thoughts. Sometimes she sketched, Sometimes she wrote reflections. And sometimes she simply closed her eyes and let the music carry her. Even the simplest sounds, the soft brush of a violin bow, the rise and fall of a flute seemed profound. She began to notice details in her surroundings she had previously ignored. The way sunlight hit the walls, the scent of her tea, the quiet rhythm of the city outside. Music was teaching her to observe life more closely. To find meaning in moments that had once seemed mundane, people around her noticed subtle changes. She laughed more easily, spoke with a warmth that had been absent, and carried a sense of calm that drew others in. Friends asked her what had changed, and though she struggled to explain, she found herself simply saying, "I found something that speaks to me, something that makes life feel richer." She did not mention the CDs or the composers by name at first. The experience was too personal, too intimate to be reduced to words. Yet, even silently, the music was shaping how she moved through her world. Months passed, and her collection of 30 beautiful pieces became a cherished library of emotional experiences. Each piece held a different memory, a different lesson, a different touch on her heart. She learned to listen actively, to anticipate the rises and falls, to savor the pauses and silences. She discovered that music could evoke memories long forgotten. Remind her of childhood mornings, afternoons in quiet parks, and evenings spent in contemplation. Sometimes tears came unbidden, not from sadness alone, but from a profound recognition of beauty and the fleeting nature of life. One rainy evening, much like the first, she sat in her chair, music filling the room once more. She thought back to the first time she opened the dusty box and felt a strange gratitude for that simple moment of curiosity. It had set her on a journey she could never have imagined, a journey that had changed not only how she experienced music, but how she experienced life itself. She realized that this was only the beginning. The more she listened, the more there was to discover, the more layers of emotion and understanding to unfold. The music was timeless, and in its presence, she had found something timeless within herself. The CD player clicked off, leaving the room in quiet once more, but the music lingered in her mind and heart. She smiled, knowing that tomorrow she would explore another piece, another story, another window into a world that had always existed but had been waiting for her to notice. And with that thought, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that this was not just a hobby, not just a passing interest. It was a path, a companion, and a quiet source of joy that would remain with her, guiding her through the days ahead. She leaned back in her chair, sipped her tea, and let the memory of the music settle in, warm and comforting, like a gentle embrace that promised more wonders to come. As the days turned into weeks, her fascination with classical music grew. She found herself waking up earlier, eager to start the day with a piece from her collection. The music seemed to breathe life into her mornings, transforming ordinary routines into moments of reflection. Even simple tasks like making breakfast or watering plants became occasions to pause and listen, to let the gentle rise and fall of a melody shape the rhythm of her day. She had begun to understand that classical music was not just sound. It was a guide, a companion, and a teacher all at once. She started to explore more about the composers behind the music she loved. Each story she uncovered deepened her appreciation for the pieces she played. She read about composers who had faced immense personal challenges: Beethoven, who continued to create despite losing his hearing; Chopin, who struggled with fragile health yet poured passion into every note; Mozart, whose playful genius belied a life of struggle and expectations. Learning about their lives gave her a sense of connection to people she would never meet across time and space. She felt that the music she listened to was an extension of their emotions, a bridge to their experiences, and that realization made each piece more meaningful. One day, while listening to a particularly emotional piano sonata, she felt herself transported into a world of memories she had long forgotten. She remembered quiet mornings in her childhood home, the soft hum of a mother's voice singing, the gentle sway of trees outside the window. The music seemed to unlock emotions she had tucked away, and she realized that listening to these compositions allowed her to feel fully, without distractions or interruptions. It was as if each note carried the power to heal, to remind her of her own humanity, and to encourage her to embrace life with a deeper sense of awareness. She began keeping a journal alongside her music sessions. In it, she wrote reflections on the pieces, emotions stirred by the melodies, and thoughts that arose during her listening. Sometimes she wrote poems, sometimes short stories inspired by the music, and sometimes she simply noted feelings she could not yet put into words. Her journal became a sacred space where she could explore herself, guided by the emotional cues of the compositions she cherished. Over time, she noticed that her entries grew richer, more insightful, and more connected to her inner world. Music had become a lens through which she could understand herself and the world around her. Friends began to notice subtle changes in her demeanor. She carried herself with a newfound calm and warmth. Conversations became richer, and laughter came more easily. When asked about her transformation, she would smile and simply say, "Music has opened a door I didn't know existed." Though her friends did not fully understand the depth of her journey, they could sense its impact. She realized that music had not only changed her perspective, but it also subtly influenced the way she interacted with others, making her more patient, compassionate, present. Her curiosity led her to explore different styles and periods of classical music. She discovered Baroque intricacies, romantic expressions, and the playful complexity of classical lyric compositions. Each style offered a unique emotional palette. She began to notice how different pieces affected her mood. Some brought serenity, others stirred reflection, and still others inspired joy and energy. She experimented with listening at different times of the day, discovering that certain compositions complemented morning routines, while others were perfect for evening relaxation. Gradually, she became more attuned to the subtle language of music, learning to read its emotional nuances and appreciate the artistry behind every note. One evening, she received a call from a colleague who was going through a difficult time. Without thinking, she invited them over, offering tea and a selection of her favorite pieces. As they listened together, she watched as the music began to soften their expression, bringing tears, laughter, and quiet smiles. For hours, the room was filled with the gentle presence of piano, strings, and the unspoken language of shared emotion. She realized that music had the power to connect people in a way words often could not, creating a space where vulnerability and understanding could coexist naturally. Inspired by these experiences, she decided to learn more about music theory and composition. She found online courses, books, and lectures that explained the structures behind the pieces she loved. Understanding the technical aspects did not diminish the magic. Instead, it added layers of appreciation. She marveled at how composers use rhythm, harmony, and melody to evoke precise emotions, and she began to see the music as both a science and an art. Every crescendo, pause, and modulation now had meaning beyond its sound, enhancing her emotional engagement and deepening her respect for the skill required to create such enduring works. During her explorations, she discovered live performances and recordings of orchestras and soloists from around the world. She listened to musicians interpreting the same pieces differently, noting how variations in tempo, phrasing, and expression created entirely new experiences. It was a revelation to realize that classical music was not static. It was alive, constantly evolving through the interpretation of performers. She began to anticipate new recordings and sought out concerts whenever possible, eager to immerse herself in the living expression of the music she adored. Her home gradually transformed to reflect her love for music. She arranged a small listening corner with comfortable seating, soft lighting, and shelves filled with CDs, vinyl records, and books about composers and musical history. The space became her sanctuary, a place where she could retreat from the outside world and engage deeply with the art that had so profoundly touched her life. Friends who visited were drawn to the room, and many remarked on the peace and warmth it exuded. She smiled quietly, knowing that this haven was not just about music. It was about creating an environment where life could be experienced with mindfulness and presence. With each passing month, her relationship with music deepened. She no longer listened passively. She engaged actively, anticipating movements, noticing subtle shifts. and allowing herself to respond emotionally to the crescendos and silences. She discovered that the music could reflect her own inner journey, echoing her joys, sorrows, doubts, and triumphs. In this way, classical music became more than a hobby. It became a mirror for self-reflection and personal growth, providing insight and understanding that words alone could never convey. One afternoon, she took a walk in a quiet park, carrying a small notebook and a portable music player. She listened to a violin concerto as she strolled, noticing how the melodies seemed to converse with the sounds of nature around her, the rustling leaves, distant bird song, and soft whisper of wind. It felt as if the music had extended beyond her headphones, blending seamlessly with the world, creating an immersive experience that heightened her awareness and appreciation for life. She realized that music had not only changed how she experienced her apartment and personal time, but also how she engaged with the world outside. Over time, she began to share her experiences with a small circle of friends who were curious about her journey. She introduced them to pieces, told stories about composers, and explained how certain melodies had impacted her. While not everyone shared her level of passion, they appreciated the thoughtfulness and care she brought to these discussions. She discovered that even those who were initially indifferent to classical music could be touched by it when presented with patience, genuine enthusiasm. Her role had subtly shifted from listener to guide. Helping others explore the emotional and spiritual depth of music, she also began to notice how classical music influenced her emotional resilience. During stressful days, a simple melody could calm her racing thoughts and help her approach challenges with clarity. During moments of joy, music enhanced her sense of gratitude and appreciation. She realized that the emotional range offered by classical music provided a kind of balance she had not found elsewhere. The compositions were not just entertainment, they were companions, offering guidance, reflection, and a safe space for emotional exploration. Evenings became a cherished ritual, where she would sit in her listening corner, light a candle, and select a piece from her growing collection. She allowed herself to be fully present, noting how each movement made her feel, how her mind wandered, and how memories and ideas surfaced naturally. Sometimes she would fall into quiet contemplation, and sometimes she would smile or laugh at a passage that felt unexpectedly playful. These sessions became sacred, moments where she could reconnect with herself and the emotions that defined her humanity. As she explored more pieces, she realized that classical music was a lifelong journey. Each composition offered new insights, and there was always more to discover. The depth and variety of the repertoire meant that even familiar pieces revealed new layers upon repeated listening. She understood that this was not a finite pursuit but an ongoing relationship, one that would continue to evolve and grow alongside her. Music had become a companion, teacher, and friend, shaping her understanding of herself, her emotions, and the world in profound ways. One quiet evening, she reflected on how far she had come since the first time she opened that dusty box of CDs. She remembered the surprise, the curiosity, and the gentle sense of wonder that had greeted her in that moment. She realized that music had opened doors she had not known existed, inviting her to explore her own emotions, history, and potential for growth. The journey through classical music had become a journey through life itself, and she felt a profound gratitude for the beauty, insight, and connection it had brought into her world. She smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. There were countless compositions yet to discover, countless stories to learn, and countless emotional landscapes to explore. Each piece offered a new perspective, a new opportunity for reflection. And as her relationship with classical music deepened, she began to notice changes in how she experienced life itself. The once ordinary and sometimes stressful routines now felt infused with a gentle rhythm, guided by the melodies she loved. When she walked through the city streets, she no longer felt like an observer of a hurried, uncaring world. Instead, she began to see small details, the way light reflected off glass buildings, the patterns of movement in the crowd, and the quiet beauty hidden in simple moments. Music had taught her to slow down and pay attention, and in doing so, she discovered a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. One evening, after a long day at work, she returned home exhausted and sat in her favorite chair. She placed a record on the turntable, allowing the rich tones of a cello concerto to fill the room. Immediately, her tense muscles began to relax, and a sense of calm spread through her body. The music seemed to carry her stress away, note by note, and she allowed herself to sink completely into the experience. For the first time in a long while, she felt fully present. Not thinking about the past or worrying about the future, simply existing in the moment with the music as her guide. She started to notice how music affected her emotions more profoundly than anything else in her daily life. Sadness, joy, longing, hope, they all surfaced naturally as she listened. She discovered that she could confront difficult feelings through music in a way that felt safe and healing. A melancholic piano sonata could soothe a heavy heart, while a lively symphony could lift her spirits when she felt low. She began to rely on this subtle, emotional guidance, trusting the music to help her process the complex inner landscape of her mind. Curiosity led her to explore the historical contexts behind the compositions she loved. She learned that many of these works were shaped by the challenges, triumphs, and daily lives of the composers. Understanding the obstacles Beethoven faced, or the emotions that inspired Chopin's nocturnes, added depth to her listening. She began to see each piece not just as sound, but as a personal story told across time. Every note became a message, every melody a window into the soul of someone who had lived and felt deeply centuries ago. It made her feel connected to history and humanity in a way she had never imagined. The transformation she experienced was subtle at first. Friends noticed that she seemed calmer, more patient, and more attuned to the feelings of others. Conversations with her became richer, infused with thoughtful insights and empathy. When asked about the change, she would simply smile and say, "Music has taught me to listen differently, not just to sound, but to people and life." While she did not fully explain the depth of her journey, those who observed her recognized that something meaningful had shifted within her. She began to introduce small rituals into her day, combining music with mindful practices. She would light a candle, make a cup of tea, and play a piece that suited her mood. Sometimes she would close her eyes and let her thoughts drift, letting the music guide her imagination and reflection. Other times, she would take a notebook and write, capturing the emotions the compositions evoked. Her home became a sanctuary of creativity and introspection, a place where she could fully engage with herself and the music that had transformed her life as she explored more compositions. She noticed the subtle ways music could change her perception of ordinary moments. A morning walk became an opportunity to notice rhythm in the footsteps of strangers and the gentle sway of trees. A rainy afternoon felt poetic when accompanied by a soft piano piece. And an evening spent cooking dinner became meditative when the strings of a chamber orchestra filled the room. Music had given her the ability to find beauty in places she had previously overlooked, turning the mundane into something meaningful and emotionally resonant. Her exploration of music also inspired her to learn more about the instruments themselves. She discovered the unique timbre of a violin, the warmth of a cello, the brightness of a flute, and the resonance of a piano. She began to understand how the combination of these instruments, along with the skill of the performers, could evoke specific emotions. Listening became an immersive experience, where she could distinguish layers of sound and appreciate the artistry behind every phrase. The more she learned, the richer her experience became, and the more she understood the incredible depth and complexity of classical music in time. She began to experiment with creating her own musical environment. She carefully curated playlists for different moods, choosing pieces that could soothe, energize, or inspire reflection. She arranged her living space to enhance the listening experience, positioning her chair near a window to let in natural light and creating a comfortable atmosphere with soft blankets and cushions. These small adjustments transformed her home into a personal concert hall, where she could immerse herself fully in the emotional and spiritual experience of music. The emotional impact of music extended beyond her own life. She found herself more present in her relationships, listening more attentively, and responding with empathy. Conversations with friends and family became more meaningful, as she carried the calm and awareness cultivated through music into her interactions. She realized that music had not only changed her internal world, but also subtly influenced the way she engaged with others, helping her foster deeper and more authentic connections. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a local music workshop being held in a nearby community center. Curious, she attended, eager to hear live performances and meet others who shared her passion. The experience was exhilarating. Hearing musicians interpret compositions in real time, witnessing their skill and dedication, and feeling the energy in the room created a profound sense of awe. She realized that music was not only an individual experience but also a communal one. Capable of bringing people together and creating shared emotional experiences, she began attending concerts whenever possible, each performance offering new insights and emotional experiences. The live atmosphere allowed her to feel the power of music in a way that recordings could not fully capture. She noticed how slight variations in tempo or expression could change the emotional impact of a piece, how the energy of the performers influenced the audience, and how the shared silence and applause created a sense of collective connection. These experiences reinforced her understanding that music was alive, constantly evolving through interpretation and interaction. Her growing knowledge inspired her to delve into the world of composition and theory. She read about harmony, counterpoint, and musical structure, finding joy in understanding the mechanics behind the beauty. Learning about these technical aspects did not diminish her emotional connection. Instead, it added layers of appreciation. She marveled at how composers used rhythm, melody, and harmony to create intricate emotional landscapes. And she began to approach listening with a more analytical yet still deeply personal perspective. During quiet evenings at home, she would experiment with imagining herself conducting, playing, or composing. She felt a sense of creative freedom, imagining how she might interpret a movement or arrange a piece. This imaginative engagement deepened her emotional connection, allowing her to experience music not only as a listener but also as a participant in the creative process. Even without formal training, the act of imagining, analyzing, and responding to music provided a sense of empowerment and personal fulfillment. The journey also encouraged her to embrace other forms of art and expression. She began visiting museums, reading poetry, and exploring literature, discovering that her appreciation for music had heightened her sensitivity to beauty in general. The emotional awareness cultivated through music allowed her to experience other artistic forms with a similar depth of feeling, noticing nuances and subtleties she had previously overlooked. Music had opened a gateway to a richer, more layered experience of the world. Over time, she realized that classical music had become an integral part of her identity. It was no longer just a hobby or a pastime. It was a lens through which she understood life, emotions, and relationships. The music guided her through moments of joy and sorrow, reflection and growth, providing both comfort and inspiration. She felt a profound gratitude for the transformative power of these compositions and the connection they provided to history, humanity, and herself. She often reflected on the journey she had taken since that first moment in the attic, discovering a dusty box of CDs that would change her life. Each day brought new discoveries, insights, and experiences. The music had given her the ability to feel deeply, to understand herself and others, and to approach life with curiosity, patience, and appreciation. She knew that this journey was ongoing, with countless pieces yet to explore, countless emotions to experience, and countless lessons to learn. Music had become a timeless companion, offering guidance, healing, and joy, and she welcomed every moment she could spend in its presence. As night fell and she listened to a gentle nocturne, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, unlike anything she had known before. The music resonated in her chest, weaving through her thoughts and emotions, leaving her feeling both grounded and uplifted. She realized that this was more than entertainment. It was a form of living, a way of being present, and a source of continuous growth. Classical music had transformed not only her moments of solitude, but her entire approach to life, and she embraced this transformation fully. Ready to continue her journey with an open heart and a listening soul, As her love for classical music deepened, she felt a growing desire to share it with others. She realized that the beauty and emotional depth she experienced could touch people beyond herself, and she wanted to create moments where others could feel the same sense of peace, inspiration, and reflection. She began by inviting a few friends over to her apartment, carefully choosing pieces from her collection that she felt were particularly moving. The first evening was quiet and tentative. Friends arrived, curious about her passion, unsure of what to expect. She guided them through a few selections, pausing to explain what she loved about each one and allowing the music to speak for itself. As the notes filled the room, she watched her friends' expressions soften. Some closed their eyes, letting the music carry them away. Others tapped their fingers along with the rhythm, caught in the melody's playful or somber moods. Conversations started quietly afterward as people shared how the music made them feel. They spoke of memories the pieces evoked, emotions they had not expected to encounter, and moments of quiet joy. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction realizing that the music had created a bridge between hearts, opening spaces for connection and understanding that words alone could not achieve. Encouraged by the success of these small gatherings, she began to host more. Each session had its own unique flow, shaped by the pieces she selected and the people present. Sometimes she focused on soothing meditative compositions, guiding listeners into calm reflection. Other times she chose energetic symphonies that inspired conversation and laughter. She paid attention to the atmosphere, lighting candles, arranging comfortable seating, and creating a warm environment that welcomed engagement and openness. Her home became a sanctuary not just for her own listening, but for shared experiences where people could come together. Free from the rush of the outside world, she discovered that music had a remarkable way of breaking down barriers. Differences in age, background, and personality seemed to fade when the group gathered to listen. The common language of melody, rhythm, and harmony allowed people to connect without needing to explain themselves. She watched as individuals who rarely spoke to each other found themselves sharing emotions, memories, and thoughts inspired by the compositions. It was as if the music created a space of empathy, understanding, and mutual respect. These gatherings reminded her of the universal power of art to bring people together and touch the human spirit. Over time, her gatherings became more structured. She began introducing themes, exploring the works of a single composer in one evening, or highlighting pieces from a particular period in history. She shared stories about the composers, the context of their work, and the emotions behind the compositions. She noticed how this combination of listening and storytelling deepened everyone's engagement. People began to look forward to these evenings not just for the music, but for the sense of community, discovery, and shared reflection that accompanied it. The joy of sharing music also inspired her to explore volunteer opportunities and community programs. She reached out to local schools and cultural centers, offering to organize listening sessions for people who might not have easy access to classical music. She wanted to make the experience inclusive, showing that music was not limited to experts or enthusiasts, but could be enjoyed and appreciated by anyone willing to listen. These initiatives reinforced her belief that music could nurture empathy.com, an inspiration in ways that transcended social and cultural barriers. As she engaged with a wider audience, she discovered that people responded to music in unique and unexpected ways. Some were moved to tears, others to laughter, and still others to quiet contemplation. She realized that the same piece of music could evoke a wide range of emotions, depending on the listener's experiences and state of mind. This reinforced her understanding of music as a deeply personal, transformative experience. She learned to appreciate not only her own emotional responses, but also the diverse reactions of others, finding beauty in the way music touched lives differently. Her involvement in sharing music also encouraged her to improve her own skills. She began studying how to present music effectively, learning about timing, transitions, and the emotional pacing of a listening session. She experimented with pairing music with short reflections, pauses for conversation, or guided visualization. She noticed how these small adjustments enhanced the experience for her guests, making the music even more impactful. Each session became an opportunity to refine her approach, combining her love for music with a growing understanding of human connection and emotional resonance. One evening, a friend remarked on how her gatherings had changed the way they experience music. They explained that previously listening had been a solitary activity, often rushed or distracted. Now it felt immersive, intentional, and transformative. Hearing this reinforced her sense of purpose. She realized that what she was creating was more than a series of casual listening events. It was a form of shared mindfulness. A way for people to slow down, feel deeply, and connect with themselves and each other through the power of sound. The experience also encouraged her to reflect on her own journey. She remembered the first time she had discovered the dusty box of CDs, the quiet moments of awe and connection that followed, and the gradual transformation that had unfolded over months. Hosting these gatherings allowed her to give back the gift that music had given her. She saw her own growth mirrored in the faces of her guests, the curiosity, the wonder, the subtle shifts in awareness and emotion. She understood that the music had become a bridge, linking not only past and present, but also individual experiences into a shared human story. As her confidence grew, she began inviting more people, expanding the gatherings to include neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances who had never engaged with classical music before. Each new participant brought a fresh perspective. The discussions became richer, full of personal stories and reflections. She noticed that the music prompted people to share aspects of themselves they had rarely expressed, creating an environment of trust and openness. It was remarkable to witness the quiet transformations that took place. The way music seemed to gently open hearts and minds. She also discovered that her guests began to bring music of their own, sharing compositions or recordings that were meaningful to them. These contributions added diversity to the sessions and expanded everyone's appreciation of different styles and composers. She learned about pieces she had never encountered, and she watched as others found joy in exploring music that was new to them. The gatherings had evolved into collaborative experiences, where listening and sharing became a two-way exchange, reaching everyone involved. The impact of these sessions extended beyond the music itself. She observed that people began to carry the calm and insight from the gatherings into their daily lives. Friends spoke of using music to manage stress, find inspiration, or reflect on emotions. They described moments when a melody lingered in their minds, bringing comfort or clarity during challenging times. Seeing this reminded her of the profound ripple-like effect that music could have on individuals and communities, transforming small spaces and moments into opportunities for growth and connection. Her growing involvement also inspired her to write down her experiences. She began keeping a journal detailing the sessions, the reactions of participants, and the lessons she learned about human emotion, connection, and the power of music. These writings allowed her to reflect on her own journey and served as a record of the subtle but meaningful transformation she witnessed. She realized that sharing music was not only about giving others an experience. It was also about documenting and understanding the ways in which sound could shape lives. One day, she decided to organize a larger gathering. Inviting a community of people she had met through her sessions, she arranged a special evening, carefully selecting 30 of the most beautiful pieces from her collection to create a flowing, immersive experience. The room was filled with anticipation as guests settled in, the soft lighting and comfortable seating creating a sense of intimacy. As the music played, she observed how the collective experience deepened. People moved, laughed, reflected, and sometimes sat in quiet, fully immersed in the power of the compositions. At the end of the evening, she watched as participants shared their thoughts and feelings. The room was alive with discussion, laughter, and tears, a tapestry of human emotion woven together by the universal language of music. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that the journey she had started with a single CD had grown into something much larger, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. The music had created connections, inspired reflection, and fostered a sense of community that transcended differences. As the guests left, she sat quietly in the now empty room, reflecting on the impact of the evening. She thought about how music had changed her life, how it had guided her through moments of stress and reflection, and how it had opened doors to understanding and connection. She realized that the act of sharing music had amplified its power, creating a cycle of inspiration and emotional growth that reached far beyond her own experiences. The journey she had begun alone was now a shared adventure, enriched by every person who had joined her in listening, reflecting, and feeling. She understood that this was only the beginning. There were countless compositions yet to explore, endless stories to discover, and infinite emotional landscapes to navigate. The gatherings, small and large, had become a way to extend the gift of music to others, nurturing empathy, presence, and emotional depth. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to create these shared experiences and to witness the quiet yet profound transformations that unfolded. Music had become more than sound. It was a bridge, a guide, and a source of connection that wool as the years passed. She found that classical music had become an inseparable part of her life. What had begun as a casual discovery of a dusty CD had grown into a lifelong passion that shaped her thoughts, emotions, and daily experiences. She awoke each day with anticipation, eager to explore new pieces, revisit old favorites, and reflect on the emotions they evoked. The music had become a companion, a mentor, and a source of joy that accompanied her through both the ordinary and extraordinary moments of life. She often thought about the composers, the lives they had lived, and the challenges they had overcome to create works that endured for generations. Beethoven's resilience, despite his deafness, spoke to her about the strength of the human spirit. Chopin's delicate yet powerful melodies reminded her of the beauty that could emerge from struggle and vulnerability. Mozart's playful brilliance inspired her to find joy and simplicity in creativity. Each composer became a silent guide, their stories in music offering lessons about perseverance, emotion, and the richness of life. Her listening habits had evolved as well. She no longer simply played music in the background. She engaged fully, noticing every nuance, every shift in tone, every subtle change in rhythm. She allowed herself to be transported by the compositions, to feel the emotions intended by the composers, and to reflect on how those feelings resonated with her own experiences. The process of listening became a form of meditation, a way to connect deeply with herself and the world around her. She realized that this engagement with music had sharpened her emotional awareness and enhanced her capacity for empathy. She continued to host gatherings and share her passion with others, but she also appreciated the solitary experiences that music offered. Even in moments of solitude, she felt connected to history, to the composers, and to humanity itself. The quiet intimacy of listening alone allowed her to explore her thoughts and feelings in depth, to process challenges, and to celebrate joys without distraction. These private sessions became sacred rituals, moments of self-discovery and emotional replenishment that strengthened her inner life. Travel became another avenue for her musical journey. She sought out concerts, festivals, and historical sites connected to composers she admired. Standing in an old concert hall where a famous symphony had been performed decades or even centuries ago gave her a sense of continuity and connection. She imagined the hands that had created, performed, and experienced these works before her, feeling a kinship with countless people who had found meaning in the same music. These journeys reinforced her understanding of music as timeless and universal, a bridge across cultures and generations. As she reflected on her journey, she realized that classical music had changed not only how she experienced art, but how she experienced life itself. Ordinary moments became rich with meaning: the morning light on her window, the scent of fresh bread, the quiet chatter of neighbors. Music had trained her to observe, to appreciate, and to savor the subtleties of existence. Even challenges became more manageable as she had learned to approach difficulties with patience, awareness, and emotional balance. Guided in part by the lessons embedded in the compositions she cherished, she also noticed the profound impact of music on her relationships. Friends and family saw a change in her presence, a calm confidence and openness that encouraged deeper connections. Conversations were more thoughtful, empathy came more naturally. Shared experiences of music created bonds that were meaningful and lasting. She often invited loved ones to share in her listening sessions, and she found joy in witnessing how music touched them, sometimes evoking laughter, tears, or quiet reflection. These shared experiences became some of the most treasured moments of her life. Her journey also inspired a creative side of her that she had not fully explored before. She began writing reflections, creating small journals that documented her experiences with music, her thoughts on composers, and the feelings evoked by each piece. These writings were deeply personal, a record of her evolving emotional and intellectual understanding of music. At times, she even experimented with simple compositions of her own, translating the emotions she felt into notes and melodies. Discovering that the act of creating music, even in small ways, deepened her appreciation for the craft and the artistry of the masters. She became increasingly interested in exploring the intersection between music and other forms of art. Paintings, literature, poetry, and even nature walks were infused with a new dimension of awareness. She began to notice patterns, rhythms, and harmonies in places she had previously overlooked. A walk through a forest seemed to mirror a sonata's structure. A poem's cadence resonated like a symphony, and a painting's colors echoed the emotional intensity of a concerto. Music had not only enriched her auditory experiences, but had expanded her perception of beauty and meaning in the world around her. Technology also played a role in her continued exploration. She discovered recordings from all over the world, allowing her to hear interpretations of beloved pieces by performers she could never see in person. Each new recording offered a fresh perspective, revealing subtle differences in timing, expression, and emotion. She learned to appreciate the diversity of interpretation, understanding that music was not static, but lived and evolved through the hands and hearts of each performer. This awareness enhanced her listening, making it a continually dynamic and engaging experience. She also reflected on the ways music had shaped her emotional resilience. Difficult days no longer felt overwhelming. A carefully chosen piece could provide solace, clarity, or motivation. Moments of joy were amplified, moments of sadness were softened, and her overall emotional balance improved. She realized that the lessons she learned from music, the patience, awareness, and depth of feeling had spilled over into every area of her life. She approached challenges with more thoughtfulness, celebrated successes with greater appreciation, and navigated relationships with empathy and understanding. As she reached this point in her journey, she thought about the legacy of music and its timeless ability to connect people. The music she loved had outlasted centuries, survived countless changes in society, and continued to inspire and heal. She understood that her own journey was part of this ongoing continuum. She felt privileged to be both a recipient and a participant in this timeless tradition. The realization gave her a sense of purpose and connection, a reassurance that her love for music was part of something far larger than herself. She also began to mentor others who were curious about classical music. Sharing her knowledge, experiences, and passion, she guided newcomers in exploring composers, understanding emotional cues, and creating personal listening experiences. Watching others discover the profound impact of music was deeply rewarding. She realized that teaching and sharing music was another layer of engagement, allowing her to contribute to the growth and enrichment of others. Much like she had once benefited from the guidance of the music itself, even in quiet moments alone, she found that music had become a companion in the truest sense. The notes, melodies, and harmonies were always present, a constant source of reflection, comfort, and inspiration. She could close her eyes and hear entire symphonies in her mind, feeling the same emotions that had first drawn her to classical music years before. The music had become an extension of herself, a reflection of her emotional life, and a guiding force in her ongoing journey of growth, understanding, and joy. Looking back, she marveled at the transformation that had begun with a single moment of curiosity in an attic. What started as a simple encounter with a dusty CD had evolved into a lifelong exploration of beauty, emotion, and connection. Classical music had shaped her mind, heart, and soul, providing lessons, comfort, and inspiration that would last a lifetime. She realized that the journey was never truly complete. There were always more pieces to discover, more stories to uncover, and more ways to engage with the timeless art form she loved. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the countless composers, performers, and fellow listeners who had contributed to the music that enriched her life. Their artistry, dedication, and emotion had created a tapestry of experience that spanned centuries and continents. And she was humbled to be part of that ongoing legacy. Music had shown her the beauty of resilience, the power of expression, the capacity of the human spirit to touch hearts across time.